In a dimly lit room, the flicker of candles cast eerie shadows on the stone walls. Marcus and Rika sat side by side, their faces illuminated by the soft glow. Marcus held an old, tattered book in his hands, the pages yellowed with age. He read aloud, his voice filled with disbelief. In Feralian society, contracts control everything. They are used for treaties, labor agreements, ownership disputes, debt repayments, trade deals, marriages, permissions for death, and enforcing laws and agreements. Marcus paused, staring at Rika with wide eyes. Really? Contracts are that common here? Rika nodded, her expression serious. Yeah, there's a reason I got a job here, and half of that's because the contract was verbal. A lot of business owners like to trick creatures like us with tricky words we can't read or understand. This one was straightforward, no screens or paper involved. Damn, so if you can't read in this world, Marcus hadn't considered how that might impact system usage until now. Plus, with contracts being such a common thing. Yeah, a lot of people can't read very well. It's not just me. Have you ever had to sign something you didn't understand? Marcus asked, peering at her with a mix of empathy and curiosity. Rika crossed one pair of arms defensively. More than once. It doesn't matter though. Keep reading, okay? Marcus nodded, his heart heavy with the implications. He continued reading, the weight of the words sinking in. The power of a contract depends on the will, technique, and strength of the person who creates it. Written contracts might hold some value, especially legally, but system-based contracts bound by magic are easier to enforce and harder to break than traditional written contracts. It's rare for anyone to use paper, Rika said. At least I've barely seen it. I imagine people only ever draw contracts on paper if they want both parties to have an easy way out, Marcus replied. He didn't linger with the thought, his mind racing with the implications of what he was learning. This guide covers the most powerful and all-encompassing of any system-based contracts to exist on Feralia while still being accessible by mortal beings. The soul contract. Soul contracts can be traced back to their earliest recorded uses tens of thousands of years ago, when written records of magic first began. The practice is rumored to have been first brought to Feralia by deities and has since been passed down, taught, attempted, and replicated by millions of creatures with varying degrees of success. An art that requires vast knowledge of mana and binding principles, as well as a large reserve of power to draw upon and an intimate knowledge of the subject creature. Often achieved through appraisal, soul contracts are often replicated with varying degrees of accuracy, and many who claim to hold a soul contract over another creature do not, instead holding. Holy shit, are you hearing this? Marcus shook a little as he read the words, the page quivering beneath his fingertips. A fake which may not grant the same protections and assurances nor be as easy to enforce or as difficult to break as a true soul contract. Shit, that's crazy. Do you think that Drathok doesn't have a true soul contract over me? I don't know. It's pretty powerful though, Marcus admitted. I mean, it doesn't let me escape from here. It forces me to go to my fights. It stops me from attacking him. His imps can use the contract's power to drag me to my fights. He needed to keep reading. He needed to determine if the soul contract Drathok held over him was even genuine. If it wasn't, there was a chance it'd be easier to break. He returned to the contents page, finding the chapter about the inherent protections afforded by a soul contract and flicking to that page. He scanned and skimmed until he found examples. Blah blah blah. Here. Asterisk, the subject of a soul contract will be unable to speak of the nature of their contract to another, unless given express permission by asterisk shit. I don't have a real contract. Holy shit, you don't? You're talking about it right now. Rika grinned at him. Marcus smiled back. It was an ecstatic feeling to realize even this much, to feel the chains around his neck loosen just a little. But reality soon sobered him. Loosened or not, the chains were still there. Even if what he had was meant to mimic a soul contract, even if he didn't have every feature of one, he still had some. He kept reading the passage. Other protections involved. Allowing the holder to nullify all attacks made against him by the subject. Check. Allowing the holder to view the subject of the contract at all times. Check, at least as far as Marcus knew. Allowing the contract holder to know if and when the subject was trying to break or go against the contract. Not check. Marcus distinctly remembered Drathok having to ask him whether or not he didn't take a weapon to his second fight on purpose and questioning if he was trying to defy his contract by doing so, allowing the contract holder to restrict and control the movements of the subject. Unsure, Marcus could be dragged to his fights. He could be forced to appear at them. He could be stopped from leaving the arena with barriers. Could Drathok move him around otherwise? He assumed that with the chains, he could. Those seemed to be an extension of the contract's power. He was leaning towards yes on this one, but the chains seemed to require proximity. Otherwise, Drathok wouldn't send anyone to get him before his fights. The ability to compel the subject to divulge the details of conversations. Drathok definitely didn't have this one. Interestingly, soul contracts didn't seem to have any caveat about revealing actions, and there was nothing about a person being unable to lie about something they'd done. But in the purview of conversations the subject had specifically, if the owner knew that two people had spoken, he could ask about it and expect to receive an accurate retelling of the words spoken. Drathok can't do everything on this list. Marcus bit his lip. He probably wants me to think that he can. Then again, he's never told me details. That's probably on purpose too. If I found out there was something in our contract he couldn't enforce, I'd probably find a way to exploit it. Better for him to leave the whole thing vague. Vague? Unclear. What? Not clear. Rika groaned, throwing a pair of hands up. Yes, what you're saying is unclear. I don't know what any of these words mean. Can you explain it again? Marcus sighed. Why had he gone for a more complicated word the second time around? Rika nodded once he explained again. Okay, so knowing that, how do you get out of the contract, huh? Good question. Marcus pulled out the appropriate chapter. Should the contract holder specify terms that aren't met by the holder within a specified margin, a contract may be terminated or put up for review. An example for this would be a promise of payment not being fulfilled within a previously specified margin after a contracted job has been completed. Can I use this? Drathok gives me rewards for the fights. It's in the contract. Limit on when he has to give them to you. Nothing like that. I wonder if I could refuse to accept one and mess with him like that. Marcus threw his hands up. I dunno. Probably not. I'll keep reading. Death of the contract holder will cause a soul contract to immediately terminate assuming an alternate holder hasn't been selected and agreed upon by both parties. Well, yeah, that's great, but it's not like you can attack the guy, Rika said. Even if you could, you really think you could kill him? It's not a true contract, remember? Marcus said. Maybe it grants him the power to stop me from attacking him if he's aware of it, but does it if he's not aware? Rika blinked, eyes sparking with inspiration. Yeah, what if he could attack him while he was sleeping, or while his back was turned? Marcus felt kind of weird to even be considering killing Drathok here. Not because he had any love for him. The guy was a complete jerk and he'd been dreaming of his revenge since he arrived at this place. He'd not considered it to even be a possibility until now. He thought his contract must be absolute. Someone would have told him if it wasn't right. Perhaps even a god couldn't tell at a glance. But no, he thought Drathok was simply a force in his life he was going to have to learn to live with no matter what. That's how everything had been presented to him until now. Hell, he was even beginning to feel slightly strange about the reaction he'd had to Drathok in their last conversation, back when he'd lost his cool at the demon and called him every name under the sun. Why? Was it because they were working together now, in a sense? Was it because some people seemed to care for him, people Marcus liked and appreciated in turn, like Lexi, like the blacksmith? Was it because he'd apologized to Marcus even if only for a fraction of the things